If you're hearing this, it means the emergency beacon finally reached the surface. My name is Lieutenant Mark Harlan, and I'm recording this from the USS Calypso, a research submarine stranded 300 meters below the North Atlantic. If you're expecting a rescue story, turn back now. This is a warning. We're not alone down here. I know how that sounds, paranoid, desperate, but I need you to listen. I need you to believe me, because if you ever find the Calypso, you must never open the hatch. It started as a routine dive. We were a crew of 12 tasked with mapping a newly discovered trench. The ocean was calm, the equipment checked, the mood light. I remember the laughter echoing through the narrow corridors, the smell of burnt coffee, and the hum of the engines. We descended without incident, the world above shrinking into a memory. At 300 meters, the sunlight vanished. Only the cold blue glow of our floodlights cut through the blackness. Then, at 2:17, the first alarm sounded, a pressure spike. The hull groaned, metal flexing in a way I'd never heard before. We thought it was a fault in the sensors, maybe a current shifting the sill. But then the sonar operator, Petty Officer Lane, called us to the control room. Something was moving outside, something big. Not a whale, not a shark, something that didn't match any known profile. We watched the sonar screen as a shape circled us, slow and deliberate, just beyond the reach of our light. We killed the exterior lights, hoping whatever it was would lose interest. The darkness outside the portholes was absolute, a black so thick it felt alive. The only sound was the nervous breathing of the crew and the distant, rhythmic ping of the sonar. The shape kept circling, sometimes vanishing, only to reappear closer. Lane's hand shook as he adjusted the gain, trying to get a clearer image. The outline was wrong, too long, too many joints, moving with a fluidity that made my skin crawl. It was as if the ocean itself had grown limp. Then, without warning, the thing rammed the hull. The impact threw us from our seats, alarms blaring as the submarine pitched sideways. The lights flickered, and for a split second, I saw something through the forward viewport, a pale, spindly appendage, jointed like a spider's leg, scraping across the glass. The hull held, but the pressure gauge spiked into the red. We scrambled to stabilize, sealing off the forward compartments and running damage control. The engine sputtered, then died. We were dead in the water, 300 meters down, with no way to surface. Panic set in fast. Chief Engineer Morales tried to restart the engines, but the power grid was fried. Communications were down. The only thing that worked was the emergency beacon, but even that was on backup battery. We argued about what to do next: wait for rescue, try to fix the engines, or risk a dangerous ascent in the escape pod. But every plan hinged on one thing: that the thing outside would leave us alone. It didn't. Hours passed. The sonar kept pinging, and the shape kept circling, closer each time. By the third hour, the air was already growing stale. The coal scrubbers were working, but the tension made every breath feel heavier. We took turns watching the sonar, each of us hoping the shape would drift away, but it didn't. Instead, it began tapping on the hull, soft at first, like rain on a window, then harder, more insistent. The sound echoed through the metal, a rhythm that felt almost intentional. Lane whispered that it was trying to communicate, but no one wanted to believe him. Morales and I suited up and crawled through the maintenance shaft to check the aft compartments. The emergency lights cast everything in a sickly red glow. As we passed the storage bay, we heard a scraping sound from the other side of the bulkhead. Something was moving along the outer hull, following us as we moved. Morales froze, his eyes wide. I tried to keep us moving, but the sense of being watched was overwhelming. We made it to the engine room, only to find seawater seeping through a hairline crack in the pressure seal. We patched it, but the damage was done. The Calypso was bleeding. Back in the control room, the crew was on edge. Lane was muttering to himself, staring at the sonar. "It's learning," he said. "It knows we're trapped." I tried to keep everyone focused, but the fear was spreading. Then, as if to prove Lane right, the tapping stopped. Silence. For a moment, hope flickered. Maybe it was gone. But then the lights flickered again, and the emergency radio crackled to life. A voice, distorted and wet, whispered through the static, "Let us in." The voice on the radio was impossible, wrong in every way. It sounded like someone gargling seawater, the words stretched and broken, but unmistakably human. "Let us in." The crew stared at each other, faces pale, eyes wide. Lane started sobbing quietly. Morales cursed under his breath, crossing himself. I tried to answer, my voice shaking. "Who is this?" The only reply was static, then a low, guttural moan that seemed to vibrate through the hull itself. Suddenly, the lights in the aft corridor snapped on. The security camera feed flickered to life, showing a grainy image of the escape hatch. Something was moving outside, something that looked almost human, but not quite. Its limbs were too long, its movements jerky and unnatural. It pressed its face to the porthole, and for a moment I saw eyes, milky, lidless, reflecting the emergency light. Then it grinned, revealing rows of needle-like teeth. We sealed the hatch, bolting it from the inside. The thing outside began pounding, each blow sending shudders through the sub. The metal groaned, rivets popping. Morales shouted for everyone to get to the central compartment. We huddled together, listening as the pounding grew more frantic. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. Silence again, but this time it felt worse, like the calm before a storm. Lane whispered, "It's inside." I wanted to tell him he was wrong, but then we heard it, a wet, dragging sound coming from the ventilation shaft above us. The crew froze, eyes fixed on the grate as something began to unscrew the bolts from the inside, one by one. The first bolt clattered to the floor, echoing through the cramped compartment. Morales lunged for the vent, trying to jam it shut with a wrench, but something on the other side pushed back hard. The metal buckled, and a pale, jointed limb snaked through the gap, groping blindly. Lane screamed, scrambling backward as the thing's fingers brushed his boot. I grabbed a fire axe from the wall and swung at the limb, the blade biting deep. The creature shrieked, a sound so high and sharp it made my teeth ache. It yanked its arm back, leaving a trail of viscous, black fluid on the floor. For a moment, we thought we'd driven it off, but then the lights flickered again, and the sub shuddered as something massive slammed into the hull. The pressure gauge spiked, alarms blaring. Morales shouted that the ballast tanks were ruptured. If we didn't act, we'd be crushed or flooded. We split up, Morales and I to the engine room, Lane and two others to the control room. The corridors were claustrophobic, every shadow a threat. As we ran, the radio crackled again. This time, the voice was clearer, mimicking the voices of our own crew. "Help me, Mark. Open the door." I froze. It was my own voice, distorted but unmistakable. Morales dragged me forward, yelling that we had no time. We reached the engine room to find water pouring in, the floor slick with oil and blood. One of the crew, Ensign Patel, lay slumped against the wall, eyes wide, throat torn open. The thing had been here, and it was still hungry. We barely had time to process Patel's fate before the lights died for good, plunging us into total darkness. The only sound was the relentless drip of water and the distant, echoing scrape of claws on metal. Morales fumbled for his flashlight, but as the beam flickered on, it caught a glimpse of something slithering up the wall, impossibly fast, impossibly silent. I swung the axe wildly, connecting with nothing but air. Morales screamed, and then he was gone, yanked into the shadows with a wet, tearing sound that made my blood run cold. I stumbled backward, heart pounding, every instinct screaming at me to run, but there was nowhere left to go. The sub was a tomb, every corridor a dead end. I could hear Lane's voice on the intercom, begging for help, but it was cut short by a guttural snarl. The thing was everywhere, its voice now echoing through the pipes, mimicking every crew member, every plea, every memory. "Let us in, let us in, let us in." I made it back to the control room, sealing the door behind me. The emergency beacon was still blinking, the only light left in the darkness. I pressed record, my hands shaking. "If you're hearing this, you need to understand. The Calypso is lost. We are lost. But whatever is out there, whatever is down here, wants out. If you ever find this sub, do not open the hatch. Do not answer the voices. Do not trust the dark. If you made it this far, comment, 'I survived the Calypso' below. And if you want to know what happened after the recording ended, subscribe because the next transmission might be from